Okay, let's get started. It's that time of week where we do discussion week. Each week, I publish a video about some aspect of anarcho-capitalism, agorism, or what was the other one? Yeah, I forgot. There's three of them. Boy, I'm off to a good start. Anyway, so I published a video like this every Thursday, and then I follow up with a little extended content with the live discussion every Friday. This is Japan time, so probably Wednesday and Thursday for other people's, but for me, it's Friday night. It's about 8:30, and we're listening to the nice sounds of Oblivion, nice background images to look at while we talk a little bit about this. So today we're going to be talking a little about four different cases about anarcho-capitalist principles, what worked, what didn't, and why they matter. So let me, I'm going to get my phone here. Yeah, make sure I can see the chats. There we go. This event will be live. Notify me. It is live. Let me see. Okay. There, 100%. Is it? There's a little delay on my phone, so I'll just let's see. There. I'll leave it right in front of me so I can see it. Okay. So, wow. All right. It's live. That picture got big. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay. I just got to make sure I'm prepared. I'm not like one of these boomer idiots who just don't prepare before the show. Let's see. So let's do a little recap. Just a short 2-paragraph recap of anarcho-capitalism and some of the theory and some of the people behind. We probably know this. We know this already. Not probably. We do know this already. So it's not going to be anything you're not familiar with. Okay. Maybe I'm not getting my music over here. Let's see. There should be some background. Okay. Okay, give me a second here. Properties. Okay. Why aren't I getting that? Let's see. Let's try this one. Oh, default. Should be coming through the speakers there. Okay. Why is it not coming through? That's okay. Don't worry about it. Oh boy, I always have this set up before for some reason. Audio stream speaker. Let's see. Bum. Okay. I need that. Maybe I need to Oh, there it went. How about this? I'll get rid of this. No, I'll just leave the screen up there for now, and let me put the music up. Just give me a second here. If you guys are joining and wondering what the hell's going on, why you see picture Oblivion on there? We need history. We don't need that in the background. Let's see. Ah, here we go. So I'll just keep this going in the background. Let's see. Okay. Boy, I really wanted that music to go on. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Okay. I'll keep it down at that level. Okay, because I don't want to hear it too loud. All right, we'll just leave it going like that, and we'll check in. Okay. Okay. So I'll just keep the screen up like this so you can enjoy the screen. Let me press play. I muted it, so just in case the sound comes through there too, but I don't know why it wasn't coming through. Hey, if you show up, leave a comment there. Okay. All right, let's do this. My goodness, what am I doing? All right, so let's go over a few things before we open up the notepad and we talk about examples. So anarcho-capitalism, as you know, is an articulated ideology that was formulated in the 20th century, developed, and it was the primary thinkers you already know, Murray Rothbard and David Friedman. But to date, supposedly no large-scale society has ever been implemented in its pure form, stateless, with all services, law, defense, infrastructure provided through voluntary private contracts, competing protection agencies, and absolute private property rights. However, there are several historical cases we're going to look at, come remarkably close by relying on private property, polycentric competing legal systems, private enforcement of contracts and rights, and market-like mechanisms for order without a central monopoly state. So these were not the ideological experiments, but organic arrangements that emerged naturally when central authority was weak or absent. And so the evidence for these cases we're going to look at as much detail as we can. We draw from economic histories. We're going to draw from libertarian analysis, like, for example, the Mises Institute publications. You can check that out. Of course, you know where to go. If you're an anarcho-capitalist like me, you know where to find this stuff. So I shouldn't have to explain too much. I'm just kind of giving a summary here. So you can find it through academic studies. It shows that private order systems can deliver security, economic growth, and dispute resolution far better than critics of anarchy claim. And we know there's plenty of critics of anarcho-capitalists. They refute the might makes right or chaos narrative, yet they also reveal limits. Most were small scale, vulnerable to external conquest, and sometimes succumbed to internal power concentration. So none really lasted indefinitely as pure stateless systems. So let's look at some of these examples and explore some of the strongest historical approximations. Now, I'm just kind of giving a general kind of introduction to this. I'm kind of exploring these things myself. But if you're new to this, I hope you enjoy it and find some information here that's useful to you and help you. And there's nothing. There's not really anything really. I'm not really treading a new ground here per se. Most of you already know this, but if there's anything you'd like to discuss during this discussion live stream, let me know during the live stream. I'll be happy to do this during the live stream, some kind of discussion. You pick a topic. Okay, so let me get my notepad up here. Okay, So, these are some of the things we talked about last time, and last time we talked about well, in yesterday's video we talked about mutualism and why it failed and how it failed with these federative cooperatives. One man, one vote. Those kind of concepts. It's more like a collectivist ideology, but without the state. We've already talked about that. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Let's see. So, medieval Iceland. You probably are familiar with this one. So this one is one of the most frequently analyzed examples in AnCap literature. There's a really good article out there. You probably already know it. You can find it yourself, and I'm not going to cover it again here, but we're just going to talk about it here in brief. Okay, so after the Norse settlement, Iceland, as you know, didn't have a king, no central executive, and no standing army or police. So the society was organized around private chieftains whose roles were like essentially contractual. Individuals voluntarily affiliated with the chieftain for protection and legal representation, and they could switch allegiances. So law was made at the annual Althing assembly. It's kind of like a parliament for chieftains, so think of it that way. But the enforcement was entirely private, and plaintiffs pursued judgments for themselves or hired enforcers. So because that disputes were often settled by arbitration or payment of restitution, virgild, rather than punishment. So killing was treated as a civil tort in that case, so with compensation to the victims and families. Okay, so that's basically just a brief little summary of medieval Iceland, the Icelandic Commonwealth. The success. So it, as you know, it endured for about over 300 years with a relatively low violence. Yeah, that's the thing. Very, very low violence. It's after the oligarch was took over, the violence went up, but they had relatively low violence compared to the contemporary monarchies. So that was a big plus right there. Also, the other big plus with the success was private coalitions. So, like, for example, like kin groups or hired fighters enforced rights. Hired fighters are kind of like cowboys or not vigilantes or bounty hunters. God, I couldn't think of the name. Bounty hunters. So they enforced rights effectively because the economies of scale in the force were low in a sparse rural population. So it can work in a small, like Liechtenstein kind of thing. Rural population kind of. Is that like a commonwealth? Covenant community kind of rural population. So the economy, the economic activity flourished. The trade, farming, and sages documented the functioning society. With what they had, it was the customary law that was predictable and market-oriented, free market-oriented. And also private rights were secure enough for long-term investment. So we have low time preferences. Another plus. As you know, David Friedman did an analysis in his academic work on the private law creation. He highlights how competing enforcement agencies like prevented monopoly abuse through reputation and exit rights. So these are the core AnCap mechanisms here. He's analyzing here. His analysis, his conclusions. So you can go check that article out. I recommend that. Yeah, there's plenty of information about it. So that was the success. Now the flaws and collapse. So power gradually concentrated just among a few wealthy chieftains who had just bought up a bunch of chieftaincies. It's hard to say that one. Leading to oligarch control. So they bought up a lot of stuff. But by the 13th century, feuds escalated into civil war, and Iceland submitted to the Norwegian rule. And that was around like 1260s or something like that, 1262. So that's what happened. The oligarch took control of it, and the violence went back up again. But the critics, including some economists like who's that guy, Vincent Galloso, he noted that while the private institutions they handled the routine dispute pretty well, however, they struggled with large-scale coordination, or when a few actors became too powerful to challenge privately. That's interesting. When a few actors become too powerful, that's kind of like what I talked about with the other day with yesterday, mutualism. That's what happens with in one man, one vote. It actually eventually becomes a tyranny, too powerful to challenge, and you have really no exit rights in a federated cooperatives. We talked about all the different examples last week. If there's anything more you'd like to add to that, feel free about the federation cooperatives under mutualism. So yeah, a few of the actors became too popular, like one man, one vote could just become a tyranny of the majority, and it just gets too powerful, and you can't really challenge it privately, supposedly. It was not pure AnCap, however. The difference was like the chieftaincies, they had some hereditary elements, but approximated competing private government. So that's the difference why that really probably didn't work. I'm sure it probably worked fine nowadays because we have better options at our disposal than they did. They didn't have as many options, so that's why they were able to. A small minority could get control, very powerful control, and you couldn't really challenge it. But nowadays we have too many options. Yeah, that won't happen. So we had the flaws and the collapse. We addressed some of what the critics had to say about it. And now how relevant? How is it relevant to our case today? Iceland, it does prove private law and enforcement can scale to a national level for centuries without a state. Yep. Definitely doable. But you got to achieve that. You got to establish your own private institutions. And that's another thing I'll probably like to get into a little bit as well, is about how you need to be more aggressive. I think a passivity role in establishing these alternative private institutes is not going to work. You need to be much more aggressive. Do you understand the people you're dealing with in these higher positions in the institutes? They're just a bunch of pathological sociopaths. And just push them. I have that case here. Maybe later we can watch a little bit of that video where they talk about that woman at Harvard who got sued for plagiarism, or she got not sued, but she was kicked out of she was the president, I think, or the chancellor of Harvard, and she got demoted because she got caught plagiarism. And how that worked was that the guy was after blood. He was really going after her because once he discovered that she was plagiarizing everything, he pushed it. He said, I was going to get rid of her. And said, okay, that aggressiveness approach works. The above ground, more visible will work because people get into a position of power like this, especially like at Harvard, and they think they're not omnipotent. They're untouchable. You can't touch them at all. And they get this almost like godlike feeling about themselves, and like no one's going to question us, and no one's going to push us or try to get us fired if we get in trouble. Or we do something bad, and so when you do push it, when you get aggressive like that guy did with the Harvard chancellor, they don't know what to do. These people in power don't know what to do when you do this. Like he describes, they're like a deer in headlights. They just look at you like, what is this? I don't understand. Why? How can you be questioning me? So that's the thing. They're just people. All right. Yeah. Just remember, they're just human beings like everybody else, and they're not. Don't think of it as some either like an otherworldly supervillain, or an otherworldly superhero. Just think of them as a fellow human being, and when if you become more aggressive, I mean, look how the leftoids are. They're aggressive. And they've captured the institutes by playing that aggressiveness. So it's probably better in the long run to be more aggressive and really push these sociopaths. I don't care if they're in positions of power. They're no better than anybody else. What was I saying? Yeah. So back to what I was talking about before. Iceland does prove that private law and enforcement can scale to a larger nation. It supports the AnCap claims that, for example, reputation and contracts, right? And exit deter predation better than monopoly government. Yeah. Speaking of exit, I'm not a registered voter. I deregistered my vote because I figured if I even voted for anybody, I would legitimize the illegitimate state. So I don't want to do that. I don't approve of what the governments do anyway. So if I vote, that shows my approval, and I don't want to do that because I don't approve of anything it does. It's wars. You know, the famous quote by Snake Plissken in Escape from New York: "Fuck your wars and fuck your presidents." And that's about right. And that's how you do it. Just don't even bother to vote. You know, try to find some people that are more libertarian leaning, some people in office, and maybe you can kind of convince them to kind of go down to AnCap possibility. But that's something that other people have talked about in other streams, like Casimir. He talks about that all the time. Anyway, back to topic here. Better than monopoly government, right? So its decline came from the internal consolidation of power. That's very similar. The internal consolidation of power, that idea, that concept there is very similar to what happens in federative cooperatives under mutualism. So that's why it didn't work before in medieval Iceland, because there was this internal consolidation of power. You know, one man, one vote can easily turn into a tyranny of majority. So consolidation of power, no inherent chaos, and consistent with AnCap warnings about preventing cartelization through open competition. Yeah, if you have that open competition, you know, that will definitely eliminate any kind of centralization or any kind of gang to occur, because people will just look for alternatives. You see that with education in the institute. People seek out, parents will seek out alternatives besides public schools or even some of those private schools. Maybe do like tutoring or find some small schooling institute that maybe let's like put together by the community you live in. That's another alternative. So, okay, so I discussed everything I want to talk about Iceland. This is a typical case. I meant not a typical. I mean, this is a familiar case. Every AnCap knows this in the literature. It's frequently cited. So that would be, of course, I chose that one as the top tier. So that's sort of your introduction to medieval Iceland. Why it worked, why it didn't, and why aspects of it can work, because we can tweak it and make it, you know, up more. Because we've got things like agorism, like this alternative currency system. So we've got that going for us. Let's see. Now, let's get to another spot here. Another example will be the Celtic Ireland under Brehon law. And this lasted, what, 1,000 years? 650 to 1650 AD. And supposedly the roots go, they go much deeper than that. So, and this one lasted longer. Roughly about 1,000 years. And Gaelic Ireland operated as a stateless, polycentric legal order under Brehon, or judge law. There was no central king with executive power over the island. Okay, multiple kingdoms and tribal units coexisted. Okay, multiple kingdoms and tribal units is like covenant communities, Liechtenstein's kind of. I guess that would be a good comparison. Law was not state enforced, but administered by professional private judges. Yeah, that's what we need. Private judges. Or like Hans and Hoppe, we just have just one judge. One absolute judge. And then Brehon chosen voluntarily by disputants. Okay, so that's good. Private judges. And they were paid fees for arbitration, and the decisions focused on restitution, right, to victims rather than state punishment. So the restitution went directly to the victims rather than federally mandated, like a state punishment across all the states or tribes. And here's interesting. Property was privately held with strong emphasis on the individual and family ownership. That's an important key right there. Enforcement relied on social pressure. Yeah. Get rid of the scoundrels, send them out to the woods. Kinship obligations. Yeah. Honor. And private coalitions. Satire and public shaming were powerful deterrents. Yeah. We need to bring back shaming again. People talk about that on the X, whatever it is, or Twitter. Okay, so those are good ideas of roughly what the Celtic Ireland was under the Brehon laws, and that lasted a little bit longer. That's probably this is a lesser known case. But we have successes, like the system produced sophisticated, predictable rules covering the contracts, the torts, the property, and inheritance. It did foster economic activity like farming and trade and craftsmanship, and in its pure industrial society without centralized taxation or bureaucracy. Yep, pre-industrial society without centralized taxation or bureaucracy. So that's okay. Yep, that's probably why the differences between that and the Iceland one. You can see there why this was more successful. And historians and to libertarian scholars, and including the analysis from the Brehon Law Academy and economic papers on Celtic Ireland, they, according to these scholars here, they describe it as remarkably stable and libertarian. So no public prisons, right? Emphasis on compensation and voluntary affiliation. And Murray Rothbard, he even called it one of the purest historical examples of stateless libertarian law. So there's a little known case to people that are just being introduced to anarcho-capitalism, the Celtic Ireland. Celtic? Gaelic Ireland. Is it okay if I say Celtic instead of Celtic? So let's see that the success. Its success. It persisted. It was successful and persisted despite the many invasions and internal rivalries. This also had internal rivalries, like Iceland. And demonstrating that resilience through custom. There you go, customs, reputation, and private arbitration. So that private arbitration here. This string here, demonstrating through custom, reputation, private arbitration. This string here exactly is what you see in a polycentric order under anarcho-capitalist theory. And that's what anarcho-capitalists will predict. So this is one of the more top successful ones. However, it's not without its flaws. For example, like the big flaws, like kinship and clan structures sometimes led to feuds, though Brehon mechanisms channeled them into compensation rather than endless vendettas. So the system ended with the English conquest in the 17th century, culminating under Cromwell and the later plantations, which what it did was they imposed common law by force. Yeah. Internal weakness included vulnerability to like external military powers that did not respect the private contracts. Hmm. So, but why? So we covered the flaws, the success of the Celtic or Celtic Ireland under Brehon law. So the relevance, though, to nowadays, Ireland does show that AnCap style polycentric law can endure for a long time, and when it's rooted in custom and private judges. It highlights also how restitution-based justice and voluntary arbitration, how that reduces the conflict more effectively than state monopoly. Of course, yeah. Restitution-based justice, voluntary arbitration, trade. Like Iceland, though, its longevity under stateless conditions challenges the idea that government is necessary for order. Certainly does challenge that. So there's two good examples. This Ireland one is a little bit better example because it lasted longer than the Iceland one. So it does, like I said, it does show that you can do this for stateless. However, we had the English conquest in the 17th century. Well, now I think now we can protect against that from happening. Okay, so we've covered two examples, and going on to the third example. And you may have heard of this book, The Not So Wild Wild West. That's a famous book in libertarians. I was actually introduced to this book through that guy Razor Fist, Rageaholic. He recommended this book during a live stream, and so I bought the book and I read it, and this is what it has to say about it. Because yeah, I recommend this book if you haven't read it. So this brings us to the American Old West frontier. And this lasted from 1830 to 1900, especially during like the pre-state-owned statehood periods. Of course. So like the book, The Not So Wild Wild West, dispels, not dispels. Speaking of spills, I still have coffee. It dispels the popular myth that usually, the Wild West is portrayed as the Wild West, violent chaos. It's not true. Everybody knows that now. Economic research by that guy, Terry Anderson and P.J. Hill, and they wrote the book, The Not So Wild Wild West. Go check it out. Go buy it, read it if you haven't. This book demonstrates the opposite, that it wasn't chaos. In areas where there was minimal federal or territorial government, private institutions filled the gap. Like land clubs and claim associations defined and enforced property rights through voluntary contracts. Again, voluntary contracts, private insurance, private arbiters. Cattlemen associations and mining districts, these guys created their own rules in arbitration and enforcement. Cattlemen association, mining districts, private protection agencies, vigilantes, often contractual, right? And reputation markets maintain the order. But when it came to disputes, were resolved by private judges, or arranged upon arbiters. And it's interesting, ironic, under this system here, violence was lower than any or many of the Eastern European cities with government. So there's something inherently wrong with the government, isn't it? It has a monopoly on violence, doesn't it? Let me check my thing here. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Well, welcome to the stream, guys. I'm just kind of going through the cases of different anarcho-capitalist states. I'm at the Wild West right now, number 3. I've covered Iceland. I've covered the Ireland, the Celtic, and now I'm covering the Wild Wild West. Okay. And if you have anything you'd like to add, or maybe you know of other cases of good examples of anarcho-capitalist societies that were successful, or maybe were successful until an oligarch or some kind of government came in and destroyed that, yeah, let me know. Let me know in the chat. Okay, so we covered the popular myths that the Wild West wasn't so wild, and we go into success. So because of things like property rights, these property rights emerged from the bottom up via homesteading and contracts, and that enabled like rapid settlement, things like ranching and mining and trade. And because of that, order prevailed because individuals they bore the cost of their actions, of their own actions, and private agencies competed on reliability. So that's why it was successful. So examples of the success include like the San Francisco's private police during the gold rush. And the people that funded were like businessmen when the official forces failed. So businessmen would fund it when the official government's force failed. And like frontier wagon trains or mining camps that self-organize rules without state backing. So again, it's kind of like forming little coveted communities. Let me check something real quick. Okay. All right. So, according to Anderson and Hill in their book, The Wild Wild West, Not So Wild Wild West, they concluded, according to their book, that private agencies provided the basis for civil society, where government was absent or distant. When people are given the option, they're going to choose non-government. You notice a pattern through these anarcho-capitalist states. Or that's the oxymoron. It's not a state. That whenever the government is absent or distant or at minimum, people seek out alternatives and the private arbiters and stuff. So, because where the government was absent and distant, this whole idea of providing the basis for civil society, this aligns with the AnCap markets for protection and law. Work when property is clearly defined. Yeah, that's the thing about the Constitution. When the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, that's the first ingredient of the First Amendment is property rights and freedom of association. If that's clearly defined property rights, then AnCap markets for protection of law work. It will work properly. Okay, so we discussed the successes here, and we've been talking about Anderson and Hill's, how they concluded that private agencies provided the basis for civil society. Now let's look at some of the flaws and transition. So the flaws here, well, the failure was it was transitional. After the government was formed, federal land policies, eventually statehood, brought government monopoly. And of course, what follows with government monopoly? Violence. Spot where private rights were unclear. See, property rights are unclear. It's kind of like what people have done to the Constitution. They believe the Heraclitean idea that everything's in flux and ever changing, and therefore the Constitution is a living, breathing Constitution. And therefore, like, for example, like private property, if it's unclear, like, you know, if they're just looking at private property like it's just some arbitrary thing, just out of convenience, like, oh, private property, it works Monday, but because I'm Heraclitus, you know, I'm going to change it by Friday. It could be something else. It's kind of like Humpty Dumpty too. They just, whatever it means this week. Freedom of speech is what we say it is this week. Next Wednesday, it'll mean something else. So they've effectively taken the Constitution and just turned it into toilet paper. It's meaningless because people are just subjectivists. They're just relativists. They just nominalists too. They just think whatever. Okay, freedom of speech is what we say, what it is on Monday, but Wednesday it could be something totally different. You know, it's not about the speech; it's about the reach. You know, you see do that in the media. too. So they just use it whatever is convenient. Yeah, it's kind of, imagine eating food that way. Imagine eating food without digesting it. I just eat food out of convenience. I don't bother digesting it. It's just food. It's food this week. Next Friday it'll be something else, whatever I say it is. So yeah, that's the problem. When things become unclear and it's not clearly defined what it is, like of course the classic one, these last couple of years, what is a woman? If it's unclear, then how are you going to be able to protect freedom of association and private property through private property rights? How are you going to do that? You can't. And that's why the violence spiked where the property rights were unclear and ambiguous. So like, for example, like open range conflicts, back to the Wild West thing. So not fully stateless everywhere, however, in the frontier days, but the frontier pockets were. So there were stateless places in there. It's funny, my not my grandfather, but my great-grandfather, who was Scottish, came to Canada to look for gold. And I don't know what this had to do with the frontier, but he came to look for gold in Canada, and he eventually came to America, but then he went to Mexico to look for gold and came back to America. But I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but yeah. So if it's not fully stateless everywhere, you're gonna have some pretty good pockets where everything's done through private arbiters. Okay. So what the critics say about the not so wild West, they say critics say that it's relied on cultural homogeneity. Well, duh, look at Japan. High trust society, homogeneity, and low population. Okay, well, if you can have little pockets, sure. Low population densities. Yeah, scaling to dense modern cities might require more formal competing firms. Okay, that's fine. You can just have private cities. I mean, you go to the Mises Institute. They talk about private. There's that article about private cities there. So it is doable. You can do this on a large scale. Scaling does work. So, but the homogeneity, that might breed a high trust society. And you have a high trust society, and you're able to, you don't need civil rights laws. Japan doesn't have these stupid civil rights laws. I mean, you actually go to hot springs where it says no foreigners allowed. Well, those hot springs don't do very good business. It's exactly what we're talking about here. The people just punish them with their pocketbook. They say, I'm not gonna shop there. I'm not gonna go to that hot spring. They say no foreigners. I'll just go to the one that do accept foreigners. So we punish them that way without use of force. So Japan's got, when it comes to civil liberties, individual civil liberties, Japan does a better job than anybody else. Okay, so how is the not so wild West relevant to today? So the West, according to this, our West is the closest we ever get to a large-scale sort of modernish example of AnCap mechanisms in action. And it does show how private order scales with commerce, mobility, and it can produce prosperity faster than centralized control. Yeah, of course. Look at the great high-speed train robbery in California. They robbed our taxes, and who knows where all that money went? Probably went to go buy, maybe like a 1652 bottle of wine or something. Staying at the most expensive hotels. Why not? It's not my money. So yeah, and it will scale faster without centralized control. And it directly counters the anarchy equals disorder myth. Of course. You still hear that today. And Michael Malice had something to say to someone that made the same argument. That just leads to disorder. That is a myth. So with the data and the low homicide rates relative to expectations. Yeah, imagine that. Low homicide rates. Well, when you don't have a government, things are actually more peaceful. Because there's no government monopoly on violence. But we can do it better nowadays, anarcho-capitalism, because we have better we have better options than these people had. So now let's get to Nova Scotia, and then the post 91 Somalia, and then what are some of the ones we have to go here? Republic of Caspia, Italy. Well, that lasted a long time. Okay, Rhode Island. Okay. So let's go over some of these other examples and modern echoes. Okay. Please chime in whenever you feel like it. You know, say something in the chat. You're wrong, or you're right, or I don't care. Something. But I hope you're enjoying today. I hope you find it informative and you go out and seek out these examples I've been talking about. Don't worry, at the end, I'll recap the examples again so you can take a look yourself. I put them up on the screen here on the right side over there. I just put them in a simple underlying, title so you can see them easily. Yeah. Okay. So other notable examples. So Academia Community, Nova Scotia, pre-1755. This is one of the lesser known, but it is a well-documented stateless success. Of course, again, per the Mises Institute analysis. So this is when the French settlers in Acadia built a cohesive and voluntary society without an essential authority. Mutual aid, private property, and consensual governance. And until what happened, ladies and gentlemen? Until the British military destruction and the Great Expulsion. Man, these can't leave well enough alone, can they? They don't like these covenant communities, do they? So that's Nova Scotia, pre-1755. Let me put that up on the screen. Let me type that up there. 8 people. Got people. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. So it's other examples. KDN community. And that's Nova Scotia. Pre-1755. Okay, let me get rid of this underline here. And I'll put that down here. We'll make a list. So that's one example. Of course, you, like I said, you can look that up on the Mises Institute and read about that. Then we have the post 1991 Somalia. I don't know if you know about this one. This is a lesser known one. It's the 1991 to 2006 pre-Ethiopian intervention. So after the state collapse, these things like clan-based customary law, Zeers, I think they're called, right? Private enterprise, they drove the telecom booms, remittances, and trade. So according to economist Peter Leeson, this data, he says it shows like improvements in some welfare metrics. So like, for example, like life expectancy and GDP proxies. Compared to the prior predatory dictatorship, of course. Somaliland, it's a de facto independent region, stabilized further with hybrid private-public elements. Private-public elements. Well, so it wasn't a pure AnCap. Yeah. However, warlords, of course, private persistence, it was better than the alternative, but not prosperity model. Better than the alternative. And we have, yeah, okay. Oops. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Hit play on that one. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure my stream is going healthy here. Okay, so that's post 1991 Somalia. Okay, great. Well, I'm glad you guys coming out and enjoy it. Please let me know if you enjoy it. You know, I need some feedback because I don't want to be just talking into the void. um. Okay, so we covered Nova Scotia and we did post Somalia. And there's another smaller one. Well, let me get rid of this underline here. There we go. And we go to wait. The Republic of Caspia. Click Italy. And this is 1440 to 1826. So go check that out. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know much about that one. I guess you could probably find out more than I can about this. I've covered some of the main examples. But this is a kind of a lesser known one. And there's even one in Rhode Island too. Showed like little tiny stateless pockets, and they were all thriving on trade and private rules before absorption, of course. Okay, so I'm going to summarize everything. If you don't have any comments or questions or anything, I'm going to summarize what I've just been talking about here. And please like and share this out. I know this is just something I'm experimenting with, and doing these discussion streams. I like to kind of branch out and get other people involved in the discussion too, as we get more into like philosophy. I don't know. I mean, I know some other people do like current events or analyzing videos. That might be another possibility, analyzing a video, but we'll see. I have a plan for next week. Of course, I always have a plan. I always produce a video every Thursday, and then I follow up with a live stream on Friday, just sort of covering more detail, maybe something I missed, or whatever you want to talk about concerning this, like strategy. I like to talk about that strategy, and we've kind of been talking about strategy, how to implement these programs if it's doable through the current institutes or not. Okay. So like the overall lessons here of the AnCap theory is that all of these cases here do demonstrate that AnCap principles, i.e. self-ownership, private property, competing providers of security and justice, and voluntary contracts produce the workable order. It does. And they can sustain trade. They do protect rights, and they avoid total collapse for generations or even centuries. So yeah. And the violence is remarkably low. It's the exact opposite of what you would find. What the typical stereotypical opinion about anarcho-capitalism is, that there's chaos ensues. But no, the violence is low, has been low in these examples we've stated. And because the violence is managed through restitution and reputation and no state fiat. Yep. Public shaming. Economic historians, they consistently find that, or have found that private mechanisms fill the voids much more efficiently when government is absent. Yep. And so I guess, I mean, yeah, but the success, though, I guess you can say, has been kind of relative. All eventually did face external conquest. Also internal too. Internal. We cover some of the internal ways how it can be destroyed from within, as well as out. So like external conquest, like Norway, England, U.S. federal expansion, yeah. Or like I said, the internal oligarchic drift when competition is weakened. Yeah, when competition is weakened. We talked about why the competition would become weakened. But however, they all lacked modern scale capital markets. Yes. Or modern technology for global defense. It's much more doable nowadays. But however, this does not divorce the AnCap. It underscores what it does underscore is the real need for robust exit rights. And of course, very open competition and cultural norms against power concentration. The cultural norm things, that's the difficult one because you'd have to do that through the institutes, like the education institutes, which is like almost impossible. The only way you can deal with education is to form alternative education. I was fortunate enough to go to a school called Therapeutic Daycare Center that only had about 10 kids. And this is at a time in the early 70s when different behavior traits was not, that teachers didn't really know how to deal with things like, deficiency disorders, paying attention, different behavior disorders. So we all just, they put us in these therapeutic daycares. They're just like small schools of like 10, maybe 12 children. And each child was assigned a teacher or like a teacher psychologist. And so the teacher psychologist would customize, personalize, and tailor the lesson to the individual, like me. So they knew my kind of idiosyncrasies, my weaknesses and strengths, and they would play on those, and it created a more dynamic lesson that way. It sounds kind of cheesy when I say it that way, but it did. It was much more personalized. I felt like the teacher really knew, okay, I think Eric likes this, so I'm going to kind of push in this direction to where his strengths are, and then he'll get him to learn much faster. And it did. It helped me much better. And so I was spoiled in that way. I was able to get like a private tutor in a sense, before I went to public schools. But then when I went to public schools, well, it just went downhill from there because I was just treated like a cog in the machine. They were not tailoring the lesson to me. It was just like, hurry up, catch up, or slow down, you're going too fast. We need everyone going at the same pace, hurry up and get in your seats. It was terrible. It was a terrible experience. I hated the public schools, government propaganda machines. And so if you have a small, like a therapeutic daycare center like that, that's another option you can have for if you have children and you want to put them through education. That would be a better option than even homeschooling. I mean, homeschooling is good, but with the daycare center like that, the therapeutic daycare center, that you can be assigned a teacher. And I mean, the way I look at it is that's how you should do it nowadays for school. It should all be tailored and customized. The parent should choose and customize and tailor the lessons to their children. And the parent should be able to choose who their teacher is. Because we have that power now where we can choose a teacher. We can go online and look in your local, area, your district, and look for a teacher who's ranked. And each teacher would have to compete. So if you really want to solve the problem with education, just abolish the Department of Education and leave it up to the states, and then eventually privatize it to where where the teachers are not guaranteed a salary through our tax money. They don't steal our money, and they don't spend our money. Instead, the teachers have to compete with other teachers, and then the parents can pick and choose the teachers they want based on ranking, and they can pay accordingly. If of course the higher the premium the teacher is, the higher the premium you're going to pay, of course, like that. But the price will stay controlled relative through the free market. Instead, now it's like teachers don't care because they get paid, they get a paycheck anyway. And I've been to teacher workshops before. I used to be a band director for high school and junior high school, and I've actually been to these teacher conferences, workshops, where I've heard teachers just openly say during the conference, or like maybe after going out for lunch or something together, I heard them openly to say they don't give a shit. They don't care about the education. I don't give a shit. I've heard teachers actually say this. Said, what do I care? I get paid anyway. I don't give a shit. They actually say it. So it's like there's no incentive there's no incentive there to create a dynamic lesson for the child. There is none. There's just like, who gives a shit? I get money anyway. Why should I even try? Why should I even put it in the work? Who cares? God, it's terrible system. Let's see. What do we got here? Oh yeah, there it goes. Okay. All right. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't want to be rambling all day, all night. Okay. Dude, I'm just checking what I have here on my smartphone. Of course, don't forget to really like and subscribe. If you guys get it in chat, we can get some more activities on this live stream and get more activity in my channel, because I really want to push this more and more. This three-pronged approach to objectivism, anarcho-capitalism, and agorism. Okay. So what was I talking about here? Power concentration. Let's see. So the AnCap does, okay. So need for a robust, that's where I was at. All right. Now this, like I said, this is just to finish up and tie in for what my video yesterday is about mutualism and its failures. Anarcho-capitalism, objectivism, and agorism, in contrast to mutualism, federated cooperatives. These federated cooperatives, which I've covered yesterday, they reject private ownership, and invite majority tyranny, one man, one vote. So these historical approximations that we've been talking about thrived because of secure private property and the market incentives. We were just talking about market incentives. And public school teachers don't have any incentives, market incentives at all. They just get paid their check. They don't give a shit. They say they don't give a shit. And they just, whatever, I get my paycheck anyway. Waste of taxpayer dollars. Hold them accountable. Restitution. And all these, they align the incentives with the human nature. So individuals protect what they own. They compete to provide services, like a teacher or a tutor, and exit bad arrangements. Get rid of the degenerates. Pure AnCap remains untested at large scale, but these previous experiments we've been talking about show it is not a utopian fantasy. It is a logical expansion or extension of what has already been working when the states recede. Yeah, no shit. Imagine my shock that people will actually just organize themselves without any government authority. But the real barrier today, though, is not the theory, but the entrenched political monopoly. That's the problem. The institutes have been thoroughly captured, and the way you have to get rid of them is to stop voting, and form your own private in anything you think of. Any kind of private institution. And you got to be aggressive. That's the other one. You got to be aggressive. You can't be passive. You got to understand the people that are in power are degenerates. They're sociopaths. And you can just push them, and they've lived in their ivory towers for so long, they can't even imagine the people would even say anything back to them or push back to them or try to get them fired. They would be in shock if you did this, and they wouldn't know what to do. So they're so used to their being up there. And remember, they're just human beings like everybody else, and you can really push them. Be more aggressive. Voting doesn't work. Voting will not work. Screw voting. It's not even worth it. I've already done a video about abolishing universal suffrage, so I'm not going to cover that again. Okay. Let me check. I haven't checked my, okay, there it goes. Okay. Wow, I got a lot of views today. Thank you. I wish I'd get more comments, though. I want more comments. That's all I care about. I want to see more comments in here. Yes, no, maybe. Maybe I did get comments. Let me check. No. No, 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 no. No. No, 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 nobody there. Okay, I was trying to see if there was any That's too bad. I'm glad you all guys came out today, and go back and watch the stream again. And let's see. So I covered all those examples. Let's see. So let me put that back up. All right. Okay, there's the nice, beautiful Oblivion screen there, and I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. It was just me, which is too bad. I want other people to join the discussion. I like that you came out today, and any feedback, please, just anything. I don't like it when I get feedback. I don't care if it's negative, just anything. I want to know, am I on the right track here? I'm just going to wait a minute here. Maybe someone will leave a comment. And then subscribe, of course, you get more updates. I post a video every Thursday, and then I do a follow-up discussion every Friday. And it's something different every week. I work really hard. I got to prepare the script, Make the videos easy. The video's easy. I don't know if you like my videos when I do it. But yeah, tell me about that too. Give me some feedback. Just say, oh, your videos should be more snazzy and more flashy, or it should be less flashy. It should be just a static screen or something. I don't know. Anything. Tell me anything. Okay. All right. That's it for today. That's it for Friday, October 10th. Oh, it's almost 9:40 p.m. here in Japan. And we're going to go out and see the cherry blossoms tomorrow. And then I'll see you guys next week, next Thursday, or maybe sooner. Check me out on, I'm going to give my, boy, people will like my comment there. Let me give you my X. I'll leave my X page there so you can follow me there. Copy. I'm going to paste that in the chat again. So there's my X. You go to my X profile and see updates. I also do modeling video and sometimes a modeling stream where I build models. That's my hobby. I like building model kits, like retro model kits. I'm building some Japanese model kits, not Gunpla. I've built some of those, but I'm not building Gunpla anymore. No more Gunpla. I'm doing the one of the models from the 5-Star Stories anime series from 1989. And they produce these amazing model kits, and they're very difficult. But I'm gonna publish a video of my whole adventure building this model kit. So I enjoy. It's not your typical model building stream where you do open box. It's none of that crap. It's just we just show the trials and tribulations and the struggles of building non-Gunpla models. I don't do Gunpla models. Okay. There's nothing else to be said, nothing else to be done. Everything has been said and done. I hope you enjoyed today's stream, and I will see you next time, and have a good weekend. Yeah.